talk about the connection between the first reading and the gospel, how it opens for us the theme of generosity this week, the theme of generosity. The second thing I'd like to do is to pull out 3 lessons for us to apply, hopefully in our lives, on this theme of generosity. So let's look at the readings. The first reading is from the first book of Kings, and we hear in this reading this prophet Elijah asking this poor widow for something to eat. He's a traveler at this time, and he's hungry, and he's looking for something to eat. But this poor widow is very poor and desperate. And just to give us an idea and context of how poor and desperate she is, she tells Elijah, who is this stranger, she says, "I only have 1 meal left. That's all I have. And I have to feed my son and then we'll die." That's how desperate she is. She realizes this is her last meal. The last little bit of food is for her and her son, and then she's prepared to die. But Elijah says that if you share with me, the Lord will take care of you. The Lord will bless you. And in her faith, she decides to be generous sharing this meal with a complete stranger who is Elijah. And sure enough, the Lord blesses her, providing food for her and her son for days to come. I think this event is very inspiring when you think of the context, how desperate this woman was, but yet how she trusted in God, and she was willing to be generous to this level with this complete stranger that is Elijah. So hopefully you see the connections going into the gospel now, Mark's gospel. We hear of another poor widow, but this time the scene's a little bit different. Jesus and his disciples are sitting sort of outside of the temple treasury where people would go and make their donations regularly, and they're watching, just like I guess many people would watch. And some of the rich people are going in there making huge donations with all sorts of show, and people are giving them credit. Wow, look at that person giving that large donation and things like that. And then this unassuming widow comes in and she provides 2 copper coins, which Mark tells us is only worth about a penny, not very much at all. So naturally, we can imagine what the scene would have been like. People must have started to judge her and criticize her as this happened. But Jesus doesn't let this happen in his disciples' minds. He doesn't even let the conversation begin. He says, "Do you see that widow who put in the 2 copper coins? She has given more than anyone, than all the people today to the treasury, to God, to the temple, because it's all she had. She gave everything she had, trusting in God." That's tremendous generosity. Again, another inspiring story for us. So what are some 3 lessons that we can glean from these 2 readings in terms of the theme of generosity? Well, 3 lessons that come to mind that I'd like to share is, first, being generous is good for us. Being generous is actually good for us. And because we're getting ready for the Christmas season, I think the popular phrase that we'll hear is, "It's better to give than it is to receive." It's better to give than it is to receive. And, I look out here at everyone, and I'm positive you've had an experience where, as a mother, a father, maybe a grandparent, you've given a gift to a child at Christmas, and you've seen the joy in the child's face on Christmas morning. They're smiling, they're jumping up and down, they're so excited. They've received something they've been hoping for maybe for a while. And it's better to give than it is to receive. The joy and fulfillment that brings to a parent or grandparent, I'm sure you'll agree, is quite amazing. That it's better than maybe the socks or the sweater that the child tries to give back to the parent at Christmas. But it's better to give than it is to receive. And we know this in terms of when we are generous and kind to other people, it gives us that warm sense of fulfillment, of joy in our hearts that we are able to help someone else when we are generous. But we know that generosity is not just about the warm, fuzzy feelings that we experience when we give and are generous to other people. It goes deeper than that. It goes deeper than that. And there is tremendous spiritual benefits to being generous to other people. There are spiritual benefits to us when we are generous to other people. Being generous, it combats 2 things. One, it combats greed. It's easy to be greedy. It combats greed because all of a sudden we start to see things no longer as yours and mine. When we're generous, when we have a generous spirit, it's no longer about what is yours, what is mine. It's what is ours. These are all gifts and blessings from God to be shared among us. And when we have this generous spirit, we combat the temptation into greed. And so the other thing that we can fight is a selfishness, wanting to accumulate things. I'm sure you've seen some of these shows on hoarding, it's unbelievable. But this is what happens to the extreme. It's all about amassing wealth and being attached to material possessions. And that's what it fights. It fights that attachment that we have to our material possessions and the things in this world. If we have a generous spirit, a generous heart, this dissipates, and we don't fall into those temptations of greed and an attachment to our material possessions. If we lose something, if we give something away, if someone else needs it more than we do, it's no big deal. It's no big deal because we realize it's no longer about what's yours, what's mine. It's what is ours to be shared, and whoever needs it is best used for it. So the first lesson is being generous is actually good for us. The second lesson is that we need to give God our best. Give God our best and not the rest, not the leftovers. Give God our best. And we see this in these two widows' experiences. The one that only had one meal left, she's giving everything she had. And again, with the second widow in Mark's Gospel, she just had 2 copper coins and she gave her best to the Lord and trusted that He would take care of whoever needed it most. And so we need to give God our best. And the first level of generosity, of a generous heart, it starts off with giving our extras, our leftovers, what we don't need. But that's just the base level of having a generous heart. It's giving our extras, what we don't need, or things like that, out of our abundance. Notice how Jesus said, everyone else gave out of their abundance, but this widow gave all that she had. And it's a big difference. It's a big difference. And, when we think about it, maybe in today's terms, it will be helpful. So say that we're seeing people making these large donations, say, $100,000 donation, and people say, wow, that's amazing. That is such an amazing and generous and kind person. And they are. They really are. But if you've got $10 million or something in the bank account, it's no big deal to you, really. But you see how these two widows, they gave their best to God. They gave their best to the person in need. In the case of the first reading with Elijah, he needed something to eat. He was a traveler, and she shared the little that she had. But it came from her heart, out of love for Him, out of love for God. So we need to give God our best and not just the leftovers. The third lesson, and the final one, is to do all these generous acts, acts of kindness, to do it out of love for God and not for love of a particular person. Now this may sound strange, do it out of love for God rather than love for a particular person. And I'll tell you why that's a good lesson. The first widow, Elijah, is this complete stranger. But as soon as he says, the Lord will bless you if you share with me, she does it out of faith, out of love for God. And the same one with the second widow. She gives her money, the 2 copper coins, not too much, to the temple out of love for God, not because it's a particular person. And again, the base level of generosity, the beginning level of a generous heart is that we give because we love someone. So think about this. If we only give to the people that we love, the people that we like, that would just be our friends, our families, maybe a select few co-workers or people in our apartments and our neighbors. It would just be the small group. It would be the beginning level of generosity, which is good. It is good. But we can go much deeper. We are called to go much deeper with our generous heart. And that's why these 2 unassuming widows in our 2 readings teach us such a profound depth to having a generous heart, the spirit of generosity. Because it's a stranger. Elijah is a stranger. And the second widow in the gospel, she is giving her money to the temple. She doesn't even know who will benefit from her gift. So you see, when we do it out of love for God, we are now willing to be generous, to be kind to people we don't even know, maybe even people we don't like. Imagine, see how that's hard to do. That's hard to do, to be generous to the level of giving to strangers or people that we may not even like in life. But that's what we're called to be. That's the prophetic witness that we give as Christians, to give, to be generous people, to have that heart that realizes that everything we have, our talents, our time, a very valuable commodity that we can be generous with, our time, and anything else that we can give to another person who is in need. That is how we develop this heart of generosity, this spirit of being generous. So let us pray today in today's Mass and in the days, maybe even weeks to come, that the Lord may help us to be a generous people who do it out of love for God, giving God our best and not just the rest.